Okay, let's hope we're live now. Quick check on YouTube. Da-da-da-da-da. Not seeing it. Stand by for technical difficulties. Yes, there we go. All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. So, this debate kind of originated with a discussion we started having on Twitter, and we thought, why not just have it with an audience so people can partake in these ideas, because it is an often returning idea, this cooperation of Islam and conservative reactionaries against the modern world, against progressivism. There's even memes about it. You'll all know the one struggle meme, for example. And so that's kind of what we're debating. Is something like that even really possible? And I'm kind of skeptical about it. So I'm going to just give a quick introduction with my initial perspective on this, and then I'll pass it on to my guests to introduce themselves and say a little bit about their ideas. So my position is that we can have geopolitical cooperation like the German Empire and the Ottomans did in the First World War and before. We can be geostrategic allies with the Muslim world against liberalism, against communism, against degeneracy. And we as Europe should let Muslims do their own thing in their own nations. I've read Osama bin Laden's letter to Americans, which he wrote in 2002, with his objections against our modeling in the Islamic world. And I generally agree with his positions. If you want to know more about that letter, there's a reading of it on my channel. However, I'm much more skeptical about cooperation within Europe. We do have to deal with the reality that there are quite a number of Muslims here at this time. And I'm generally more on the side of send all the Muslims back to wherever they come from. I think the joke here is send all the Moroccans back to Istanbul. But let's be honest, that's not really possible at this point. That's an unrealistic position. So while there are over 1 million Muslims in the Netherlands and over 600,000 Muslims in Belgium, that's a reality we have to deal with. And conservative Muslims do share our opposition to globalism, to degeneracy, to Marxism, to usury, in large part because these forces are also destroying the Islamic world. And that's even more so the case here in Europe, where younger generations of Muslims are becoming just as degenerate as our own youth are. So that's kind of where this debate came from. Can reactionary nationalists and conservative Muslims put their differences aside, at least on some issues, to put up some kind of united resistance against the forces of progressivism and neoliberalism that are destroying both of us? I'll end it for now and say that for me it's a resounding maybe. And note please that this will not be a debate about Islam itself. It will not be about theology. It will simply be about practical things like how we can work together. If you want something about religion, go watch a Richard Dawkins debate. All right, I'll hand it over to you two then.
Okay, I'll say it. I'll start. My name is Kublai. I'm from Belgium. My position on right-wing ideologies is pretty critical. So instead of talking about what to do in the short term or whatsoever, I believe that the right wing at the moment, at its current state, is very intellectually bankrupt. And then I am referring to all three. I mean, maybe not all three of them. I believe that basic conservatism, like Edmund Burke, stuff like that, that's somewhat intellectually defensible. But the further right you go, like when you go to straight up counter-enlightenment ideals and so forth, I believe that there should be a deeper analysis of why the modern world is like this. It's not because of instead of it's a little bit of an extremist position, but yeah, you guys know Ted Kaczynski, the Union bomber. He said conservatives are delusional because they try to preserve a traditional society in an industrial world. And this is something that Karl Marx also said in his Communist Manifesto, that whatever conservatives try to do, whatever right-wing nationalists try to do, they will always fail because the industrial society is changing so rapidly, changing so increasingly that it becomes almost practically impossible to be seriously right-wing in this modern world. So I think that right-wing should focus more on that. And personally, That's, like when it comes to Muslims and Europe and so forth. I'm not really that much of a extreme right winger. Like, I personally don't care about LGBT people, so forth. I think my position is more of a cultural conservative, in the sense that I believe in preserving Europe's heritage and so forth. And I believe that Muslims, should do as Romans do. Like, if you're integrate or maybe assimilate in the society. That's my position on it. Um, yeah, I think that sums it pretty much up. So
So the problem of alienation, yeah, that's something that is indeed in both Karl Marx and Kaczynski. Now, I'm not a very traditional conservative in that sense, because technology is especially something I focus on, AI and technology. So I'm more on the archaeofuturist side of things. So people who follow my channel for a longer will know that I specifically try to address these sorts of things, the problems of traditional reactionary conservative politics that technology makes impossible. All right, then Aisha.
Yes, I'm a North African Muslim from the Netherlands. I believe Islam is a solution for Europe. I have respect for Western nationalists. I prefer them over the liberals, over the socialists. I do see a potential alliance between the conservative Muslims and conservative Christians. I think we need each other hard in this difficult times. And about Ted Kaczynski, I've also read Ted Kaczynski. I agree with Ted Kaczynski, in fact, but I do not agree with his anarchist solutions. I think that Islam would be a good solution, because Islam is the only traditionalist religion that could prevent. Christianity would not prevent that. Christianity is too modern, too liberal, too progressive at the moment. So
I disagree with that.
You disagree with that?
Yeah, I think the reason I think that all religions over the world are dying out or decreasing, at least in influences, and that Islam is no exception to that rule.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's one of the reasons we could possibly work together, because we're both facing the same problems, the same enemies. If you look at the Islamic world, it's being bombed into oblivion, of course, by the Americans. You're getting the gay flag rammed down your ass by Tomahawk missile, and the youth here in Europe, in the Netherlands, is pretty degenerate, you'd have to admit. And that's due to modernity in a large part, and alienation, and the fact that they're.
I'm not even saying like in Western Europe. It's happening in like Middle East as well. So religion, atheism, agnosticism is all like rising, and that's mainly to do with the internet, the spread of information, and people simply prefer the materialist worldview over the religious one, and there's pretty much common in. Even in Europe, where we have a right-wing nationalism, nationalism in itself is also like a religion, kind of, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So even that, like, nationalism becomes like significantly less. Loses its grip over society. So it's like, I feel like the world in its entirety is becoming more global, more cosmopolitan, and more irreligious.
I think that doesn't necessarily have to go hand in hand. I think it is possible to have a modern world that is also religious. It's a matter of power and who controls, schools, TV, media, that sort of thing. So if there's a religious control over society, for example, in your example would be Islam. For me, it would be some form of Christian-derived futurism. You could probably still steer the society in a direction that maintains a lot healthier balance with things that can't be changed. Everyone probably knows what. Damn it, what's the name?
You're referring to the postmodern power.
Kind of, but I'm talking more about the fact that there are perennial truths. I'm generally of an opinion of perennialism, and you need something like religion to deal with those problems, because humanity won't change that fast. The same problems we faced 10,000 years ago in social order and so on, relations between the sexes, will still exist in 1,000 years. Well, maybe not in 1,000 years, but for a long time yet. And you can you're going to need something to steer that. Currently, liberalism is the dominant form. It just doesn't work. So it'll have to be replaced at some point anyway. And it'll have to be something more akin to traditional religions. And if you control the institutes of power, I think it's feasible to do that.
When we are talking about perennial school, are you referring to René Guénon or Julius Evola?
For example, but I'm more not specifically referring to any of the writers, more to the general idea that there are perennial truths, which can be found even in sociologists like Durkheim.
Yeah, because the thing with Julius Evola, I mean, the guy at the end of his career, he basically became like a fatalist, and René Guénon, his idea that Eastern philosophies, and there's something that Abu Aisha will probably refer to, is that Eastern philosophies or religions such as Hinduism and Buddhism aren't as bulletproof towards the forces of modernity as he initially claimed that they were. But it was also like in the early 20th century. So we've seen in China, we've seen in India, we've seen in the Muslim world that religion isn't those local religions aren't as bulletproof against the forces of modernity.
Right. I think that if nothing changes, if the current trends continue, then of course all religions will be destroyed, because that's just what the neoliberal capitalist order does. Religion is a barrier to consumerism and markets and so on. So of course that would happen. So without change, yes, and that's kind of why we would have to work together to try and change things.
But I mean, like, the thing is, what you're referring to is like a postmodern will to power, right? So you basically control the institutions. Yeah, but I don't see a longevity in that type of strategy to change the modern world.
Why?
Because you can only do so much with totalitarianism.
I'm not suggesting totalitarianism.
Or authoritarian.
Yeah,
but also authoritarianism. You've seen, you have many examples, but like, if you maybe say like Iran, right, where you have like the top-down re-traditionalization of society that completely, became a failure, because even the Iranian regime themselves admitted it. Like before the Iranian,
they were just Iran. If it had happened in more places, they would have had a better chance.
Yeah, but I mean, even in more places. Okay, so what you're hinting at is like a global revolution, then?
Yeah, it had. Well, in the West, at least, in powerful countries, the United States have to fall apart, and Europe had to become a power bloc or something like that.
Okay,
but that's too hypothetical. I actually wanted to make this a bit more pragmatical in the director sense. We're making it a bit too philosophical. We can also do that if you want. But I, for example, had a question prepared here, so I'll start with that and we can discuss that.
Yeah.
So, firstly, I have to assert this premise is a huge amount of Muslims in the West are anti-white, are degenerate. They fall for BLM rhetoric. Of course, same thing applies to whites. There's a lot of degenerate whites. And on the whole, we don't have to look at the mass of the people, because they don't determine anything anyway. It's the leadership. It's the leaders, the intellectual and political leaders. And who are the intellectual and political leaders of Islam in Europe, and who are the intellectual and political leaders of nationalism in Europe? Well, it's both not very good. I mean, you've got Denk here and Nida, for example, and then for a nationalist movement, there's barely anything. Or we have to look at something like Wilders, which is completely liberal. So from a purely pragmatic point of view, how would we ever establish any kind of cooperation? Let me put that one forward.
Sorry, can you
answer that? Yeah. Or I mean, Abu Aisha.
Can you repeat it? I didn't understand the last sentence.
So the idea is sort of, let's ignore the fact that there's a lot of liberals among whites, there's a lot of degenerates among Muslims, that we both have problems as a people. It's all about the leadership of these groups to pull something forward. considering what exists in terms of leadership, in terms of political parties and so on, how could we ever find any way to cooperate with the current existence parties, like with the PVV or FVD, with Nida and Denk? That doesn't seem to be much of a way there.
You mean a democratic solution? Yeah.
I mean, just realistically speaking, say next week we want to try and do something as a united front, say against abortion or something, or something like gay pride marches. How would we ever set something like that up where both Muslims and conservatives would work together on that?
Well, somebody mentioned that to you. He said, like, before, North Africans or something like that, you would never be right wing. Would you agree with that?
We would never be what?
You would never be right wing if it wasn't for Muslims in the Netherlands.
Yeah, I've heard that too. You agreed with that.
Yes, so that's a particular.
Yeah,
and yes, and I am generally of the opinion, but we'll get into that in a minute, that we shouldn't have Islam in Europe, but we'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah, like that's, in my opinion, one of the biggest issues, because the right wing doesn't care about preserving. I mean, like, a lot of right wingers don't really care about preserving any cultural heritage or whatever. It's very reactionary. So they are very anti-liberal, but they don't seem to preserve anything. Like, if you, for example, let me take an example of, like, if you have an English businessman in Antwerp, he can live there his entire life, not even bother to speak a single word Flemish. And most Flemish people, even the nationalist ones, they will not care about it. But then you see a Moroccan or a brown person, and he speaks like half broken Dutch or Flemish, and they will freak out about it. So that's the issue with right wing.
Yeah.
It's very reactionary. It's very anti-liberal instead of trying to preserve something in Europe. So it's.
Well, I think my kind of nationalists are a little bit more about preserving culture than that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But I mean, like, a magazine about preserving Dutch heritage and culture.
Yeah.
Of course, the majority are just racist liberals, like Flam.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I know. Yes, that's a problem we have to deal with as well. True.
So I believe that you have to reverse that first. Sorry to interrupt you. You have to reverse that first, and to create, like, a genuine, like, nationalism should be about love, right? You love your heritage, you love your local city, you love your country, stuff like that. And I don't think that most brown people disagree with that. Like, they don't want like a fucking McDonald's at every corner. They want to see, like, local culture. I mean, everybody agrees with that. You don't even have to be right wing for this, even, right? Even like your average African or your average Middle Eastern, they didn't come to Western Europe because, they like the culture or something like that.
Yeah,
that's like, they go for the money, they go for the job employment and stuff like that. So I think that there should be, like, a ideological shift towards that direction. It should be more about love and rather than to be against something.
Right, but we can definitely agree on that. And I think we have, as Europeans, some serious issues with Americanization and degeneracy and of exaggerated liberalism to deal with, for sure. But those are our problems to deal with. And this sort of instake, the idea of this debate was like, how can we then work together on that? And that's why I come up with, well, who's the leadership, who's the organizers? How are we, in a pragmatic sense, going to work against things like destruction of heritage, destruction of culture, introduction of English, all these things? Like, how would we practically do that?
Like, for me, individually speaking, I voted for the center right wing, which is like N-VA in Belgium, which is also, like, considered like a Flemish nationalistic party. I mean, I don't really necessarily agree with their entire party program or something like that. But I thought to myself, like, they have, like, a decent economic policy. They also try to preserve the cultural heritage, the cultural identity of the Flemish regions.
Yes.
So that's the reason why I voted for them. And
but I think that more as a group.
Yeah, I think that a lot of Muslims, I'm just talking about Turks, this is my community, obviously. I think that they won't. I mean, they are actually open for that because they themselves are culturally center right wing, right? Like, we're right wing themselves. But the thing that bothers them so much is because they see, like, Anvia caring about Middle Eastern politics because they want to appease America, or they see like that type of not explicit but like indirect anti-Muslim rhetoric.
Yeah.
And I understand like you can critique Muslims in Western Europe for their crime rates and so forth. I have no issue with that, but sometimes it's hard to determine if it's like genuine criticism on the communities or like
Yeah.
straight up racism. And I feel like if they downplay that racism and try to, like, it's good that they are critical about the Muslim community, right? There's a lot to criticize about Muslims in Belgium and in the Netherlands, but I feel like they should be more, I guess, nuanced or better approach that type of, those problems.
Yeah. Well, I'm an ethno-nationalist, so one thing I won't compromise on is the fact that eventually there has to be a remigration of at least the vast majority. So let me get into the second point that I wrote down, since we're not really getting very far with the organizational thing. So in the end, it's obvious that we do want you to go back in the long term. So does it make sense for you to cooperate with nationalists? Because it's a devil's bargain. But then again, your other option is working with the left, which will also destroy the Islamic world, and a lot more thoroughly. So how is your perspective on that?
I'm not as anti-left as you maybe, but I wouldn't like if it's like rational, if it's like humane. Yeah, sure, I'll go back to Turkey.
I think So, Aisha, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I think leftism is really dangerous for the Muslim community, just as it is as the white and conservative people, Christian people. I think Islam is a little bit more bulletproof than Christianity, but you can still see a lot of damage happening. And just like you said, thank the party that's supposed to represent Muslims is like pro-LGBT and all these things. In fact, I've said this often, but I considered voting SGP, the only conservative party in the Netherlands. The only thing that's keeping me and also many Muslims, even Salafists, etc., is that they are so extremely pro-Israel and they join these anti-Islamic course of Geert Wilders. So I think that's a little bit stopping them.
But let's just talk from the perspective of extremes then. Like my kind of ethno-nationalists who are really far right, and your kind of properly conservative Muslims. Let's ignore the PVV, NVA, Vlaams Belang, who are they're so anti-Islam. There's never going to be a possibility of cooperation with them.
Mm-hmm.
With us, we also oppose Israel. We also oppose LGBT, degeneracy, Americanization, all these things. So it'd have to be the fringes cooperating, right? So your sort of Islam, my sort of nationalism. Could we work together in some way, do you think?
I could work together with the Christian conservatives. I'm not sure about all ethno-nationalists. I mean, some people are more extreme than the other ones. I do respect the European folk and their sovereignty, their history. And I think it's immoral that the globalists are trying to wipe it away for their own agenda, or the Zionists, or whatever you want to call them. And I think, but if you could press a button right now and kick every Muslim in Europe, would you have done it?
Of course I would.
You probably would have, but I think you would be way more vulnerable to progress. I think Europe would be completely degenerated.
I mean, we already have training story hour in schools and libraries, man. I don't know how much worse it can get. It's already
it will get worse. Not only will every conservative person, or many conservative people will get kicked out of Europe, but this accelerationism, people will become right-wing or left-wing because of these anti-Islamic course, I guess. That will also be gone. So it will be double more left-wing.
Yeah, I suppose so. Vlaams Belang and PVV would be wiped away for a large part.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's true. But on the other hand, in a pragmatic sense, I think you're being just as eroded as we are. It's just a little slower, as you said. And you're maybe a bit more resistant to it. But eventually, when the rest of society around you has been completely degenerated as well, anyway, if you're completely surrounded by acid, you're going to melt down as well at some point. So in a pragmatic sense, I don't see how you, other than radicalizing people maybe by your presence, but how are you fighting back against liberalism and progressivism, not just here but in the Islamic world in general? I mean, look at Syria, look at Assad, look at Turkey. The youth there is becoming Americanized, just like ours.
That's why I think it's useless to tell Muslims to go back to their own country if they want to avoid the liberal Western lifestyle, and that we keep complaining we need to go back, because there's no point if we go back, because globalism will still affect us. So I think it's important. So I think it's important that Muslims or Christians, whoever, or a combination of it, destroy the source of globalism, the media, academia, Hollywood.
Yes.
Social media, all
How
these
are we
things.
going to do that? How can we work together on doing that? I mean, and not something like a crusade or jihad against Jerusalem. That's not in the books.
I mean, in my opinion, there should be. I think that the right wing is intellectually bankrupt, and there should be more focus on that part.
Liberal, right? Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I do. That's what I, of course, am focused on. We whites have
I
in our community to fix, and our people to fix as well. You've got we're I live in Rotterdam. I am around Muslims a lot. You're very clearly segregated into your own Zuil, basically. And what we have to try to do for now is to build our Zuil as conservatives and nationalists as well. But presupposing that we both have these Zuils, these pillars with churches and mosques and so on, and media and parties, from there on, we might be able to do some things together. That's what I'm sort of trying to get at work. How would we be able to do something like that?
Well, I think especially for the Muslim community, it's important that we avoid getting corrupted by liberalism. Like, I don't know if you know Daniel Lagigiatio, is a YouTuber. He's very well known for battling liberalism and modernity and protecting them, basically red pilling the Muslims about them so they can stay conservative. We need more of this, way more of this. And if we do this, and well, I hope more people will convert to Islam. that would make it way more better. But I think because we have a growing presence in Europe, if we keep conservative eventually.
I have a question for Faust.
Yes.
Because you've expressed yourself positively about Christianity, right?
Generally speaking, yes.
Yeah. Why can't you replace Christianity with Islam?
Because it's not our tradition. Now we're going to get into a debate about Islam, and that's not really what I want to do. But fine.
Okay. But I mean, like, Christianity is also
there's a few things, but for me personally, I like Christianity for its theology. I don't care about the Bible. The traditions are, well, that's part of our heritage, so I like the traditions and the architecture, but I'm not so fond of the Bible because it's a book about Bronze Age people, which aren't my people. But I do like Christian theology. For example, Aquinas, Augustine, Luther, and so on. Sure, it's all based on the Bible, but these things are the basis of science and philosophy of nature and so on. And for me, Islam has a serious problem with causality, in that everything is dictated by Allah, and and Islam explicitly says that there is no such thing as action, reaction, cause, effect. Causality is dictated by God and not by fixed laws in nature. And that's for me a very big problem because I'm very materialist in my thinking. Also, it's not a European aesthetic, really, Islam. And so it doesn't really fit with us, I think.
I mean, if you're a materialist, aren't you a modernist already?
Yeah, I'm an archaeofuturist, so I believe that that there are perennial and eternal truths, that there is a coherence and order in the universe, which to me leads to something like God, to something that dictates why things are logical. I also think the universe is pretty deterministic because from the Big Bang onward, everything is following a set path, and things like free will are very minimal because we're mostly just computers reacting to external stimuli. So I think everything is already pretty much preset in motion, which is how I come to something like God and a godly plan and so on. So I'm materialist, but not in the way most materialists are.
Okay, yeah, I understand that. Yeah, that's also like, I feel like, Muslims in Western Europe would feel much closer to like the romanticism of Thierry Baudet rather than your type of materialistic nationalism.
Well, I do believe aesthetics and traditions are important to attract people, which is why I make art, which is why I make a magazine about art. I think my way of thinking is not appealing to people and doesn't suit most people, which is why in a traditionalist society that I would design, I'd be locked up in a castle somewhere doing experiments the public doesn't need to know about. That'd be my role.
But I mean, like, so you do acknowledge that you're a very minor part, one-man army, one might say, in the Dutch right-wing scene.
I do this. Well, this is becoming something completely different now. I do these streams and so on because no one else does. I don't really want to be a public figure that much or be a leader, but no one else does. No one else has the balls to do these sorts of things, so I do it. And I like writing about stuff. Really, that's what I would normally just do, write. But I do these sorts of streams and discussions and put my face out there because no one else does. That's the main reason.
Yeah, because I mean, like, as Muslim, I would feel close to, let's say, like the romanticism of, the FAD or, NVA, the type of, Burkean or just like, religious type of conservatism. But that's the type of, that type of materialism is, and postmodern type of will to power is something that I don't really see having longevity, and it's not really an ideology that I believe in, nor do I believe that Muslims can reconcile that type of idea.
No, I know.
Yeah.
Most
So I
people
think
can't
that
go with my ideas.
Yeah.
That's why this shouldn't be specifically about my ideas. My
Okay.
ideas are for a niche of scientists and so on, economists, people who are extremely autistic and too high on the IQ spectrum to function in normal society, really. Like I said, in the society that in my ideal society, I wouldn't be preaching these ideas to the general public because I don't think they'd be beneficial for the general public. I'd
Okay,
let priests run that sort of thing.
Yeah, but what would your objection be between like Muslims massively voting for FAD in the Netherlands or NVA in Belgium?
Well, NVA are cucks, and FAD is a complete mess. I wouldn't really have objections. I don't see a future for Europeans as a people if we let you be here. Essentially, Sure, your birth rates are also stagnating currently because of modernity, but you're still outpacing us. We're killing ourselves with drugs and alcoholism, boredom, other modern forces, and all the migration eventually will topple it so that we are no longer a dominant power within our own countries. And I don't think we should let that happen.
Did you just say Muslims voting FAD?
I did.
Cool. Yeah.
Do you see a realistic chance of happening that on a massive scale?
And if Thierry Baudet stopped, being like overly pro-Jewish and overly pro-Zionist, yeah, sure. And also like a little bit less Islam bashing.
Well, he's not really Islam bashing, I think.
I mean, sometimes he does.
A lot less than Wilders, though.
Yeah, but I mean, like Wilders' entire career is based on that.
Yeah. See, my proposal to Muslims in Europe would be more or less this: we help you with education, money, and investment to raise the standard of living within the Islamic world. So, for example, we let Turkey into the European trade area, not to Schengen, but into the European trade area. We start investing in Northern Africa, in Muslim world. We let you get a fairer share of the of the oil income. So we'd have, instead of a petrodollar, something like a euro oil currency instead of the dollar. And we just raise the standard of living in the Muslim world to something similar to ours. So the economic incentive is taken away, and the incentive that there becomes that you go back. And we sort of form an alliance against the rest of the stuff, everything that's degeneracy, the neoliberals, the communists, so America, China. Of course, that's very far from being possible at the moment. This would require nationalists and conservatives to be very strong within Europe, but that would be my long-term deal to put to Islam. Basically, we let you have your own world. We trade with each other. That's about it. We work together against degenerate forces.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't have any issue with that, but 1 second. Somebody says in the comment, do the guests know anything about Remigration? Yeah, we know about the perennialist school, and Julius Evola was pro-Islam, but I don't think that he was Muslim.
I have his book, but I still didn't read it.
Yeah, but I mean, like,
converted.
Yeah, Rene did, but Evola didn't. But other than that, like, thinking very pragmatically, I think that if the FVD was a complete fucking mess, okay, like that party, I feel like at the moment Thierry Baudet is losing his mind. He's becoming like a wappy, or he becomes
completely off his block, I'm afraid. I don't know what happened to the man, but yeah.
I feel like he has like a serious Napoleon complex or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of the reason. I mean, like, if he succeeded and stick to his initial years, then yeah, he would have like become like more Muslim and more positive about Muslims. And okay, yeah, I get it. You don't want any Muslims in Europe.
Specifically about Muslims, it's not even so much.
Or like non-Dutch natives, let's say. Yeah. So I mean, like, I think that eventually, I'm not really that much of an ethno-nationalist. I believe that people, if they don't feel, I feel like ethnicity, like Oswald Spengler would say, is like race is something. If you talk too much about it, it means that you don't have it anymore in you. Do you know what that means?
That's
like
the thing with every problem. Every time you start having to legislate or talk about a problem, it's already almost too late.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, it's too materialistic. I believe in more a type of spiritual ethnicity. So you are like spiritually Dutch. So I don't really agree with that materialistic point of view. But I believe that eventually, if your type of, Europe for the Europeans, that type of nationalistic mindset, non-interventionist type of mindset is somewhat maybe possible. And especially, developing Africa, or like not developing. I mean, not that Dutch people are going to work for Africans or something like that, but like, try to make it. Try to make it a fair trade, right?
Yeah.
Instead of exploitation. I think that the ones that will want to move will move, and the other ones, they will become assimilated in the greater Dutch entity. So they will basically be swallowed up, in my opinion.
I'd be willing to accept some measure of that, but not more than some tens of thousands. It can't be half of what's here currently. It has to be less than that.
How many allochtonen are there? I know that you guys don't have that word.
Specifically Muslims.
No, allochtonen in het algemeen.
In Netherlands, about 2 million non-white allochtonen, 2 million white. And in Belgium, I think it's also something like 1.5 million, 2 million.
So that's like still 80%, right? 80% is native of the Netherlands then, or
something like that. And then another 10% is white, non-Dutch.
So 70% or?
So 90% is white, more or less. 85.
Okay, you don't have any issue with other whites, or?
I do some,
okay.
But that's more economical.
Anglos.
I don't like Anglos. Yes.
Well, what's your issue with Anglos?
I'm not a big fan of the whole brain drain everyone from Eastern Europe, destroy their economies by taking away their workforce. I don't really think that's a good idea either.
Would you have a problem with Joram van Klaver?
I think that's a hard one, because he is Dutch, and someone like you mean like converts, right? White converts. Yeah. I think I'll accept that. I don't think there's much of a chance that they'll take over the entirety of society. And if they're Muslim, at least they're not liberals.
Yeah, but I mean, what's your issue with the Anglos, out of curiosity? Because they're Germanic.
No, they're not. No, they're not.
Dude, I mean, like, survival
No.
drive always is like, you're
And barely
Anglo-Saxons.
people, let alone Germans. Well, it's a bit of a meme, but historical reasons, rivalry. I strongly believe that we need to meme back conflict as much as possible because the conflict makes people stronger. So we need to have another fourth channel war or something like that. Also, Anglos are responsible for things like liberalism, the really degenerate kind of capitalism. Like they always say, the Dutch invented capitalism, but we invented stock markets and limited liability companies.
But
we didn't develop all of this fucking Wall Street banking usury that the Anglos do. That's the Americans and the Anglos business, and of course, certain other people.
you know that like the Dutch, the Flemish and the Dutch merchants set up the base of the English economy in the 13th and 14th century.
Yeah, I know.
So they kind of influenced that type of thinking.
Yeah, the thing is, we influenced each other. Of course, we're neighbors.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cultural exchange of ideas, but generally, I think the Anglos take it too far. They backstab all of their allies. Anyway, this isn't about me hating on Anglos. I've done that.
Okay. Just asking, but I get that.
It's a bit of a meme, all right. I also hate the French, the Polish, the Italians. Everyone non-Dutch, non-Germanic. They're
chosen ones.
No. You have to.
Okay, and just out of curiosity, so we have 80% of the Dutch people being Germanic. Let's say that. Isn't that like if we stopped all migration to the lowlands, wouldn't that be enough to swallow those non-Germanic people up?
I think 20% is high. I mean, 10% is non-white.
But they're dispersed. They're dispersed.
No, that's not true. In the Randstad, they're very concentrated, of course.
Yeah, but they're.
If I go to neighborhoods here in Rotterdam, there's areas that are just Moroccan, just Turkish, or just foreign in general. So they're segregated. I think the problem would be that eventually you end up something like the Austro-Hungarian Empire, where you've got all these ethnic groups completely living apart from each other, with this really underlying simmering hate that eventually, because that's one of the things as well. You've pointed this out. One of you pointed this out before. Islam is very hated by a lot of people, and I think things continuing as they are, that would end badly at some point. If it's just street violence as such as it is now, but escalating to that being a constant problem.
Okay, but let's take a hypothetical scenario where like the allochtones, so the non-natives, are dispersed all over the Netherlands, and they're kind of forced or they are engaging in inter-ethnic marriages and stuff like that. You would think that 20% is good enough to swallow it up?
It's too much. 5% might be acceptable. The thing is, if your countries of origin are of the same standard of living as it is here, is there really a reason for you to stay? Because I don't get, I interact with Muslims reasonably regularly, mostly Turks and Moroccans. From a lot of them, I don't get the impression that they are very happy for being here. A lot of them are completely alienated because they know they're not in a society that's theirs. They live in a parallel society, and you can tell, especially among a lot of the male youth, that they're not. It doesn't affect them well. I think they'd be happier.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that a lot of them will, would return to the home countries, as you put it, if their living standards, material living standards, would, increase. So yeah, I have no disagreement with you on that point.
Right. So I think, generally speaking, we can do this on friendly terms. I think we can do this in a way that's beneficial for both of us. But this wouldn't have to be completely just about remigration. That's something that I think is necessary to establish cordial relations as well, because the hate against Moroccans and Turks, for example, also translates into geopolitics. Because why would we care about what Erdogan does if it weren't for the fact that there are a lot of Erdogan voters in the Netherlands, things like that, right? Why would we care about Morocco if there weren't people with double passports? That makes things more difficult. It sets things on edge. So that's a complicating factor that is, in my opinion, unnecessary to have.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I'm of the personal opinion that if you're in Rome, do as Romans do. So, like in the city that I live in Ghent, in Eastern Flanders, I'm trying to when I'm outside, I speak in the dialect, East Flemish dialect. So I'm trying to preserve the culture, buy
But
some
you should
coffee.
preserve your culture, right? I mean, if all the Moroccans assimilate, and that's the problem with globalism, because Dutch culture is being eroded as well. So there will be very little to integrate into. This is a point that Dennis Honing often makes, that
Yeah,
you're going to integrate into global capitalism. And
yeah.
if it's eroded here, it'll be eroded in your home countries as well. I mean, you should be trying to maintain your culture, and we should be trying to preserve ours. And globalism, multiculturalism is a big factor in the difficulties we have in preserving that.
Yeah, but that goes back to the initial point that I made. Is like, why are we in this? What's the root of this cosmopolitanism and stuff like that? And in my opinion, yeah, Americanism, and I
Well,
believe that.
in large part, for example, I think one of the problems we have is that we don't think about economics enough. I studied economics.
You know what's ironic? Just to interrupt everybody here, it's like we are complaining about Americanism, like three people who all speak fluent Dutch in English.
I know.
So
that's why I set up my channel in English.
Yeah,
People want everything in English.
Yeah, that's also like, that's kind of the reason, like the modern world forces us to be progressive. And that's going back to the industrial problems. It's like, why are we so interconnected? Why are we so globalized? And that's because of the industrial world. And I believe that unless we have like a very critical view, I'm not saying that we should blow up all factories and so forth. Yeah, but I mean, like, we should have like a more critical view of the modern industrial world. And I believe that religious people, and not necessarily you or archaeo-futurists, but like people who are anti-futurists rather, so like religious conservatives, such as Catholics or Calvinists, I guess, in the Netherlands, and Muslims, they have like this type of more critical stance towards the material world, right?
Right, but I'm critical towards the material world as well, but from a very different perspective. In fact, I have a video on this channel about Ted Kaczynski and why I think that if you take a long-term perspective on the evolution and you take an evolutionary and Darwinian perspective on things, you apply that to technology, Ludism is no solution, because eventually, and that's the problem with all ideas, right? Say we fix IT tomorrow, the ideas will fade. People will fall back into bad habits because that's the way of man. We always look for comfort and we look for easy ways out. So say we burn down all technology, in 10 generations, someone's going to reinvent the wheel, and eventually you get steam engine and it starts all over again. And even if you were to wipe out humanity, the likelihood of intelligent life emerging on an infinite timeline in an infinite universe is 1. So there will be maybe super intelligent dolphins or octopuses establishing industrial society then, say in 10 million years. So I have these issues with Kaczynski's solutions. I think his analysis is correct. I have this with Marx. I think a lot of his analysis is correct. His solutions are stupid.
But I mean, like, if you apply your theory, why does anything matter then?
Well, that's kind of a problem I have, and that's again one of the reasons.
Yeah, and I think that, in my opinion,
rationalism leads you down into nihilism, and it becomes very difficult to care about things, and that's a struggle for anyone who's too focused on those things. But let's not get into that.
And that's the reason why I feel like Muslims and Christians have like a bit better case against material worlds than materialists like you do.
Well, my case is too complex to form into an ideology that is easy to sell to a lot of people. You'd have to understand biology and economics and so on. And it's too complex to sell to a large part of the population, so I don't try. I just think that the elites in control of society should know about these things. The population can be kept pace with religion. Religion as the opium of the masses might be true, but I think that's a good thing. because you don't want everyone to become an overly rationalistic nihilist, because you completely destroy society into some sort of wave of mass suicide.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, like, for example, the type of nihilism that you would escape through religion is like, because, and not
It's
really.
the external purpose.
Yeah, and also like in Islam, and there's like a kind of pro-Islamic perspective. It's like I'm talking about the Hanafi. So you have like different sects of Islam, Sunni, Shia. There's also a third one, and then you have like the schools of law, which is the Hanafi school, and then you have like a principle. For example, like one of the 5 principles of the Sharia, so the Islamic law, is like lineage, right? That's why a woman cannot take her husband's name. And that's kind of like when you look at Islamic law, Islamic Hanafi law, you see like there is this very strong preservation of the local identities. Now, of course, in Christianity, you kind of have like the type of mentality as well with the Tower of Babel, I guess. And so in that sense, nationalism seems to be somewhat compatible more with religion than with materialism. I'm not saying it's pro-nationalism.
There's some things, for example, Islam is universalist. Most Abrahamic religions are universalist. Nationalism relies on tribalism. So there's an inherent contradiction somewhere there. Doesn't necessarily have to continuously crop up, but eventually it does become an issue. I mean, one of the reasons Christianity declined in power is because of the rise of nationalist ideas in Europe, because, well, you can't be part of a universal church if the filthy French are also part of the universal church, right?
Yeah, but I mean, nationalism initially was like a progressive and progressive idea to replace the feudal society. But anyways, I'm going to leave Aisha to
I think this has become too much a discussion about personal life philosophies. So, to get back to the question, would that be an acceptable deal for the future? And again, to repeat, how can we work together now in the current world? Because, well, one problem is a lot of my followers will say we don't want to work with these immigrants, and your followers, especially the more radicals, will say we're kuffar and we don't want to work with kuffar.
Right. Well, I think the question should be, why should you guys be helping us? Because I think we're the main resistance force in Europe. But I'm actually not sure. I know why we need an alliance. I know that globalism, leftism, and progressivism is way worse than the conservatism of Christianity. But I don't know how we are going to create an alliance that will have no conflict, that will benefit both of us. I think it's going to be difficult. And you said even if we solve this and we go back to our countries, I think you're a technophile, right?
Kind of, I guess.
So you support like transhumanism? And
I don't support it. I see it as inevitable. But again, that's a bit of a separate discussion.
Yeah, I think that would create a lot of problems in that.
Yes, but that's the thing. I think that if we go into that, this will eventually make this entire discussion pointless, because I think on the long term we're going to develop AI, humanity will be replaced, and a better species of sorts will take over, because that's what happens throughout the history of nature. All species die off. There's a continuous line of increasing complexity, and that's just how things are. But again, that would just completely make any discussion pointless, because it's a fairly nihilistic position. So let's not get into that.
Yeah, somebody said something in the comment section, and I wanted to respond to that. Yeah. If Kublai was living in the country of his ancestors, would he then prefer ethno-nationalism for his country? I mean, my type of ethnicity is like spiritual rather than genetic or materialistic. So yeah, I mean, like if a Dutch person, let's say, goes to Turkey, marries a Turkish man or woman, and his children live there, and so forth, and they become like completely assimilated to the point that they lose any connection with the Netherlands. Yeah, I wouldn't mind that.
Turkey is already quite ethno-nationalist, actually, way more than Netherlands.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I mean, Yeah, I think that that's normal. I think that's the reason why I believe in like conservative values. I believe that people want their community, and I don't blame Dutch people or Flemish people to want the same, right?
Yeah. Well, let's focus on this then. We have common enemies, Usually capitalism is destroying our people in the most direct sense. I think that's one of the most direct problems. You mentioned technology. That's an important issue to talk about, but that's not specifically something. And of course, degeneracy and so on, which are destroying us. I think we can perhaps work together on separate specific issues, like I suggested. For example, maybe in an anti-abortion rally, we can have Muslims and conservatives work together, but only on that specific issue. It'd be, well, we wouldn't be friends exactly. We just hate the opposition more than each other, I guess.
Well, I think that's a problem with ethno-nationalists. Ethno-nationalism prevents such alliances. You will have a very hard time bringing Muslims to achieve your ethno-nationalist utopia like white Europe. So I think
I think that most Muslims are actually pretty ethno-nationalistic themselves. I mean, like go to like Moroccans, go to like blacks, go to like Turks, and ask them, would you allow your daughter to become, part of like X group? They would say like no. And Islam. I'm not saying that Islam is racism, by the way, but Islam promotes the type of interconnection that I said, like with marriage. That you
I
should.
don't know if that's really anything to do with Islam, though. Isn't it more that that's just innate racism and tribalism that all people have, and you just haven't been affected as much by this globalizing talk because it's not really directed at you, so you can get away with it. Basically, Islam is not a racial religion.
No, but I mean, 50% is correct on what you say, but I believe that Islam also strengthens, and this goes back to the lineage part. Islamic law actively promotes, type of preservation of lineage. So, for example, as a Dutch person, like imagine that you're a Muslim for a moment, and the Netherlands is Muslim, you would have to seek somebody from your type of region, because you also have like 70 provinces in the lowlands. You have to seek somebody who's culturally close to you. So you couldn't be, I mean, preferably you shouldn't be with, like, let's say, a Muslim from the Middle East.
Do you know Dennis Hoeing and his proposed Ottoman sort of millet system?
I think that Dennis Hoeing is more an attention seeker. I don't even think that he's a Muslim. I mean, I remember him bashing Islam, so maybe he's a Quranist, I believe. But he did bash the fiqh. He did bash, Sunni theology. So
yeah,
I'm a Sunni
I think
Muslim.
he's role playing at this point.
Yeah. He's
Right.
like he's more like a Muslim because he hates the modern world, which is kind of like. Daniel Hakikatu, who's also like, it's like Rushvi, who are those types of supposedly.
Daniel's actually a Muslim. I think Ifola would be a better example.
I don't know how Muslim he is. He always tries to tell me to convert to Islam, so I guess he's that passionate about it at least. But his proposed system is something you were talking about, would be sort of like a millet system where people have their own ethnic.
Also,
right, but with an ethnic and religious component.
Also, like Islamic law allows for duality, so I think that might maybe interest you.
Yeah, we just have to pay taxes to you, right?
Excuse me?
We have to pay taxes.
No, not like that. For example, if the Netherlands, for example, so for example, in the early Turco-Islamic era, you had the Töre, which is the Turkic traditional customs. And you had the Sharia, which is the Islamic law. So Islamic law allows for like and this is why while Hakak says like the impossible state, why the Islamic state is impossible in the modern world, is because Islam is very local. So for example, in the 17 provinces, in the lowlands, in other words, you'd have like local laws, and then you would also have Islamic laws. While in the secular modern world, that doesn't exist.
I would prefer to just have a straight up theocracy. Just say priests are like they take.
Yeah, but I mean, then you don't have the Germanic law, because the Christian law goes above the
Well, that's why that's what Protestantism isn't it? It's the character of Germanics and so on combined with Christianity and removing a lot of the incompatible elements, I'd say.
Okay, I think that Protestantism is more like a fundamentalist Christianity, so like the Christianity back to the roots.
To an extent, it's also that. But for example, there's a reason Calvinism and Lutheranism took so well in Northern Europe. It's because it was molded to more suit the character of the people.
Okay. I mean, like I grew up in a Catholic region, but supposedly a Catholic region, so I don't really know that much about Protestantism.
Right. Anyway, I have some questions from the chat if you want to do those, or we can go over something else, because this has mostly been a debate about differences in philosophy at this point. I'm not sure we can really get any practical solutions because, let's be honest, none of us really have power or influence enough to make a difference. But I would say that, in my opinion, pragmatically, we can work together on certain issues. I am not like Islamophobic as the PVV in a sense genuinely is. I do want you to go back eventually. I think we can do this amicably. I don't think it has to come to bloodshed and fighting and all that. I think we can make a mutually beneficial deal. But you do have to go back, in my opinion.
What about race mixed people, by the way?
Well, that's a difficult question.
Like half white, half Indo, like half of the Netherlands?
Half of the
the average,
the average Dutchman, like 2/4 black, 3/4 Indo, 4/4 white.
Yes. By the way, you said that Muslims are ethno-naturalists. I kind of agree. I'm Moroccan myself. I think if you're a Moroccan girl and you want to marry a black person, it's impossible.
Yeah.
In the Netherlands also. But we don't really show our, this kind of ethnic nationalism or supremacy.
Every time I have to work with, especially Moroccans, but also Turks, I'll just sort of hint at, so what's your opinion on Israel? And like half the time they'll be talking about Mein Kampf before I know it. So, I know how racist the community is. I don't have an issue with that.
Wait, so Moroccans are white supremacists?
Yes. All Moroccans are white supremacists.
Interesting.
In the American system, I think you're officially categorized as white. So
why? Because we founded it?
Even Turks are
because North Africa is just considered white, Middle Eastern.
No, man. I mean, blonde. Somebody says that in the comments. I mean, like blonde-haired, blue-eyed Turks. Most of them are Bosnians or Balkan Turks. Only we have like, right? No, like Yugoslavs, Slavic people.
Ataturk was, I think, Greek.
He was. No, he was.
He wasn't.
No,
He's Bosnian.
He was. He's partly Albanian, I believe, but partly Albanian, partly Turkish. So, yeah, but I mean, the thing is, like, I agree. Like, Muslims should unify under, against Americanization, as you call it, against materialism. Even though you're a materialist, so I don't. I mean, like,
but not in the way you think. But that's too complicated.
Yeah. Okay. But I mean, you get my point, right? Yeah. Being critical about the industrial society can also be, allied on community issues. So the importance of community, importance of family. Low tax. No, that's just a joke.
I have a question here in the chat that I actually want to answer real quick. Someone says, so yet when push comes to shove, they go on about spiritual ethnicities and all sorts of Gwenonite nonsense to try and brainwash the normies into accepting them and their mud spawns who meet on the battlefield soon enough, simple as. So what's the point of this discussion is to try and avoid that. I don't really want this to end in bloodshed and violence because, what the whole Second World War was authoritarian anti-capitalists fighting each other. And then what happened? The Americans went off as the laughing third, took over the world and completely ruined it.
Yeah, so and at the end of the war.
If we start fighting the Muslims, like nationalists against Muslims, who wins in the end? The liberals.
We already allied, right? Twice.
Yes. I guess to accept, like, there's no benefit in us fighting against the Islamic world. Yes, there's too many Muslims in Europe, sure. but that doesn't have to end in bloodshed. And if it starts going into bloodshed, we'll have another sort of Second World War situation where all forces of conservatism and traditionalism are fighting each other, and the liberals are on the sidelines making money and laughing about it. And things will be even worse after that. So I don't want this to end in bloodshed. I want all forces that are against progressivism to work together. Sure, that won't mean we are all friends and la-di-da and we'll be skipping under a rainbow holding hands. No. We still hate each other to a large extent. We are kuffars, they're foreign immigrants, sure. But it
I mean,
doesn't
that's not hated.
we start
That's
fighting each other.
Then yeah, that's not hated. That's just a difference in opinion. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, like, yeah. So I mean, like, community, anti-materialism, anti-Americanization. So I don't want to see McDonald's on every corner of the street. I want to see Belgian cookie shops, waffle shops, candy shops, traditional, not a big, multi corporations, stuff like that. I want to see like universal sweatshops. I want to see the type of localism actually. And again, like, I think that my beliefs as a Muslim is perfectly compatible with that. So I do endorse like conservative Flemish people.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think we share a lot of, well, like I say, mostly enemies, but also some similar principles and values. And no one benefits from us fighting each other. In fact, I genuinely think that the whole race discussion, immigration discussion, is one of the ways that corporate elites use to distract us and keep us fighting each other rather than anyone critically looking at what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I think
that's a problem, but it also means that, yes, it is being used as a distraction.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't mind your proposals to go back. I mean, I think that people, if they don't want to assimilate or assimilate or mix into the big pots of Dutch or Flemish culture, they should go back. And every nation for itself, so I have no disagreements with that.
What do you mean with integrate with Dutch culture? How is that gonna look like?
I think that you assimilate, so you have like, I mean, you marry a Dutch person, or you are completely Dutchified to a point that the only thing that is different is your skin color or something like that. But other than that, your name is Dutch, your heritage is Dutch, your main language is Dutch.
Yeah, well, look, I'm not in favor of integration. It's kind of pointless to try
Assimilation.
I'm also opposed. I just want you to go back essentially. And
Okay, I mean,
it's really worth trying to convince each other about that because we're not going to agree.
Okay.
I have questions from the chat if you want to answer them, unless you've got anything.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
All right. So, what's the consensus among Muslims on leaving the Netherlands and Flanders?
I actually say that. So.
The consensus, I mean, if your proposal is basically that the living standards are good in their home countries, as you put it, I think that most of them, I mean, not maybe most of them, but many of them, a large portion of them will go back to those countries.
But the current, like, what's the current thinking or something like that?
I've recently checked out the status for economic migration. I believe that more Turks migrated back to Turkey than they went to Germany, but I believe that because the Turkish economic situation is horrible, we see more, migration from Turkey to Europe.
But would they want to go back? Because I know it's a phenomenon, for example, that elderly Moroccans, when they retire, they move back to Morocco.
Yeah, that's very, very common amongst Turks as well.
Yeah. So it is really just the economic situation then.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
exactly.
would go back. Okay. Right. Are Muslims pro-vaccination?
No, definitely not. My mother's really, really anti-vaccine. Almost any Muslim is. But I've seen Muslims, like, you're not allowed to go outside after 9 p.m.
Yeah.
It's called avondklok.
Yeah.
I've heard some Muslims say that's good, so people cannot party and drink alcohol and like Sharia kind of things.
Yeah, I can understand that.
But yeah, we don't like vaccines, yes.
Well, I do think it's an interesting fact that DENK is essentially populist as well, and they're also against the curfews and the lockdown measures They're very similar in their rhetoric to FED, in fact, and I think that's kind of funny.
I think Denk, together with FED, were the only parties who wanted to open the sports schools.
Okay. Kubilai has to go, unfortunately, so we'll just round it up with the two of us. Gives you a chance to talk as well, because you haven't talked that much.
True.
Then we have European culture was the first victim of modernity. It swallowed that whole. Isn't there a danger that Europeans mistake modern culture as their own instead of the real native cultural heritage and defend the wrong thing? You have an opinion on this?
Who says that? Can you show it on the screen?
Essentially, are too many Europeans thinking that this current global culture is European culture and that's what they want to defend? I say yes. For example, people like Wilders, PVV supporters who go on about gay rights and liberalism.
The mainstream ones, definitely, yes.
Yeah. A lot of them do. They've fallen for the liberal story, the narrative, and that's what they think Europe is all about. That's what you hear, like, what are Dutch values? You'll get that question, and it'll be like, oh, it's freedom and individualism and secularism, that humanism, and we pulled humanity out of the darkness of ignorance with our fantastic enlightenment and so on. And that's what
I hear often, this is our Western values, we need to protect our Western values, and then they give examples like LGBT or feminism. Their Western values are like going with the progress, so basically immigration, I guess, would also be a Western value. So where do you see Western values? Is like the start of the Western side, like Roman Empire, or how do you define it?
I think it's all part of it. I think even the Enlightenment is part of Western values, even liberalism. Liberalism is essentially Anglo thinking distilled into an ideology. But as everything, there are even good ideas in liberalism. The problem is idiots get hold of it. It becomes popularized. The mass runs away with it. And then it becomes something that is completely unrelated to. People can't even make a coherent argument in favor of liberalism most of the time, even academics. Well, you could do that. Same thing with Christianity. One of the main reasons, for example, Christians looked so bad in all those debates in the 2000s was because a lot of the preachers and defenders of Christianity were completely uneducated and didn't know very much about their own religion or the theology. They weren't smart people. So the problem of any idea is that the mass gets hold of it, the mass of the people. And that's why you need something like religion to make sure that only the people who should be discussing ideas do so. Only intelligent people can find them and discuss them. And it shouldn't be put on like big TV screens or anything like that, because that just ruins the society and it debases the entire idea that it's about. So I think all of it is still part of the European tradition. It just needs to be trimmed of all the fat and all the useless stuff and all the excess that it has accumulated, all the dumb ideas, and get back to the core what it is, which is a sort of stoic, post-Christian, Platonic sort of philosophy, because that's also what the Enlightenment is, and that's also what Christianity is. It's just interpreting these things in very different ways. So I think that's the root of European culture tradition, and of course, just habits over the ages.
Okay. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's my position on it. The internalization of anti-racism by allochtonen, the victim complex, is that not damaging for them?
The victim complex.
Yeah.
Well, the problem with the victim complex is something Denk especially does is you will start joining the other people who have a victim complex, and you will have like you will help each other with solidarity. So you will start seeing like Moroccan and Muslims joining like transgenders and other so-called victims that aren't supposed to be fitting with our culture or religion. So I don't really like it. I also think that it removes their ambitions. Like they can really blame easily something, and it like makes them lazy. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, so it's damaging.
Definitely.
Would Muslims support freedom of association? then we can preserve our communities and there would be less strife. Would it be better than this forced community mixing? They think it reduces strife, but just makes everyone without community less happy. I think we sort of addressed that one already.
Freedom of association?
Yeah, so basically end this whole forced multicultural thing, I guess, as he's saying, and just let people form their own communities, sort of verzeiling. So like I said, I think we sort of addressed that.
Okay.
Are there any more questions in the chat? Post them now, and I think we'll just start rounding this up. Do you have anything you want to raise?
Well, I do see an alliance. I don't know if I could trust the people to keep Europe traditional. And like, for example, I know that many fascists are like pro-transhumanism, pro-technophiles. I also don't like the Wignets, the edgy nationalists in the Zoomers. You got a lot of them.
I know, but then you've got your radical jihadists and so on, right? Who you'd have to be able to keep in check.
You want me to keep them in check? Why?
Because they don't tend to attack the right targets, now do they? Shooting up some innocent woman in a metro doesn't help anything.
I agree. I don't know why they do that.
No, if they're going now, let's not Fed post actually. So let's not do that. Not even in Minecraft. I had some more things written down. Let's see if I have. Oh yeah, I do actually think, for example, you say Islam is more resistant to it. Yeah. My perspective on it is that jihad is sort of the last violent resistance against neoliberalism from your corner, like types like ISIS and Al-Qaeda types and so on. That's the last struggle of Islam, like Europe 80 or so years ago had its, or 100 years ago, depends on which one you look at, had its last violent struggle against modernity and liberalism, but lost. The monarchies were destroyed, parliamentarism and so on, and constitutionalism was enforced on us. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you will win the violent struggle. And after that, you're going to be absorbed and eaten up just like us. What's your perspective on that? And by the way, I would like to say, I do think jihad is pretty heroic. I mean, to take an AK-47 and nothing but your faith and go up against the American military, you got to be pretty committed to do that.
I think Christianity is like quite peaceful compared to Islam. I think you can see many Muslims are willing to die for their tradition, for their religion, for their Quran. It has always been like this, by the way. It doesn't necessarily have to be ISIS or Al-Qaeda, by the way. These are the most extreme versions. But you will even see, you will see Shia or Sufis or the more secular ones like the Ba'athists, Saddam Hussein kind of times. They are all willing to. They are all more heroic.
Thomas Carlyle even, and I guess Guénon and so on always said this, like the Bedouin warrior is a very fierce type of warrior. The thing is, you still can't face up against the European military, which has better technology.
Well, I mean, if you look at a country like Yemen or Syria, look at how many countries are attacking them, like America, entire of Europe, and even the other Arab countries like Saudi Arabia and Qatar, etc., Israel. So yeah, I think that's a little bit unfair. I think they're very badly trained, actually, the European armies, especially the Netherlands. The Dutch army is one of the worst armies.
Even the Dutch army can take on like a third, something like the army of Jordan or something.
Well, I don't know. No, I don't think they would. I don't think they would succeed fighting a country like Jordan. I think they have no bullets, right? They don't use bullets for training.
Like we've got that gives us too much of an advantage.
Wait, I lagged, I think. What did you say?
I said the technological gap's just too big. But anyway, from the perspective of Muslims and in the Islamic world, isn't it more sensible to support nationalists, even though we want remigration? you're not going to get anything from the left, right? Except also destruction.
No. I mean, we could use them. We could only use them if Muslims are like resistant against them, but that's not happening right now.
No. Well, you can use them for individual benefit, like diversity quotas, and then use that to reinforce your own group. But I'm not sure that's enough.
Well, you see some people, some Muslims, and even Salafists, they're like trying to use the leftist people. They're using their solidarity and pro-immigration stances. They think they are smarter than them, that we can eventually overthrow the European countries. But I think the globalists, they know what they are doing. They have brought us here. I actually agree. They brought us to Europe for their own agenda. And their second phase is happening, which is liberalizing and secularizing the Muslims. So we are not a threat against the liberal globalist society.
Look at Macron, right? That's his whole deal.
Yes, especially with Macron, he's fighting really hard against that. But also the people who are like pro-Islam, but they are like corrupting them with LGBT and these kind of things. So it's like a hidden threat for Islam.
Yeah. So cooperation with
the Christians. I don't know about. There's a lot of nationalists. There's traditionalists. There's the Christian theocrats, the monarchists. Who I don't know what the most dominant version is. Like next to the mainstream liberal right wing.
Probably Christianity in some form.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's very sad to see how small of a group. I think SGP we can both call the only conservative party in the Netherlands, right?
Yeah.
It only has 3 seats of 150 seats in the Netherlands.
Yeah, I read a study not too long ago about how the entirety of Dutch society has shifted to the left over the last 20 years, including the SGP, where they were, of course, forced to allow women on their electoral ballot and rescind some of their positions about Bibles in schools and these sorts of things. So, yeah.
I think they will follow the same fate as the CDA, the other Christian party. The Christian Union is already fucked long ago, definitely. So, I don't know. I like FVD, I like Baudet.
Well, Baudet, do you?
No, I mean, I like some of his ideas. He's very charismatic. We can both agree with that.
Is not a good leader.
Well, I think he definitely destroyed his changes, to be honest. The right wing in Netherlands is very balkanized right now. Like, you have FVD, you have... I don't know how many right wing parties you have right now, but...
Something like 7.
7?
Ja, wij zijn Nederland, Code Oranje, Ja21, FVD, PVV, SGP. Who else do you have? You've got lots of these other small groups who don't make a stand a chance, of course. But the ones who stand a chance are like Code Oranje, Ja21, maybe Wij zijn Nederland, and then the three bigger ones.
Yeah, I think VVD, Mark Rutte, is going to keep his position for a quite long time. Even if PVV, which is the second biggest right-wing party, if he would succeed. The problem with PVV is he's not really helping. He's really liberal, pro-LGBT. He's not going to solve the birth rates. He's not going to solve the family values like SGP is. So you will have another problem when all immigrants are gone, according to your...
Yeah, but we have a lot of... My position on this is generally that we have so many problems to deal with. We don't also need the immigration problems and everything that brings with it. I mean, we've got our own house to fix, and it's a complete mess. And then, like I said before, all this immigration, what it does, it causes us to fight with one another over immigration race, which obscures a lot of the other important issues.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, someone in chat says, what about money influence from Gulf states? Would that help more to push conservative talking points? Now, Gulf states do send a lot of money to mosques, but what's your take on that?
I know that Saudi Arabia and I think other small countries are known. I don't think they do it anymore since last year, but they were known for financing a lot of mosques in Europe for their own political agenda. But I have a really big problem with Saudi Arabia. I mean, I think Saudi Arabia is becoming very modern, very progressive also. Like Mecca looks like Las Vegas at this point.
Yes.
I think the biggest funder of mosques is Erdogan, I think, of
No, well,
the
yeah, you mean
TNF
yeah,
mosques.
that's Turkish mosques, but they don't do funding so much as they do. They control the programs and so on, and they control the imams in the mosques.
Mhm.
A lot money is more something the Saudis do.
Okay. I thought they stopped with that last year, but I'm not sure.
DNet or the Saudis?
The Saudis.
I'm not sure about that. You mean the mosques here in the Netherlands specifically?
Yes.
Right. I haven't looked into that, to be honest. You might be right. But it could potentially, like, the problem is that the Saudis are also becoming modernized and degenerated. I mean, they signed this pact with Israel last year under Trump, right? So even though they have a lot of money, they're not spending it on exactly useful things. They're building like football stadiums and paying athletes to come do stupid things like sports.
Yes, I agree.
All right. Any questions in the chat anymore? I don't think so.
Saudi Arabia progressive. It's quite progressive right now, actually.
You have to consider the perspective, right? Like they've allowed Saudi has allowed women to walk around in public unescorted, driver's licenses over the last few years. They're quite quickly moving towards a more progressive society. Sure, by our standards, it's still very conservative, but it's not moving in a good direction in that sense.
I mean, 1 or 2 years ago, I think they were planning to have a concert of Nicki Minaj close to Mecca. I think you could call it quite progressive, actually. I think she canceled for like political reasons, like woman feminism or something. But they actually wanted to do that. So it's
the thing is, money can buy just about everything. So if they wanted to do it, they could probably have a lot more influence on world politics. I mean, look at how much George Soros and Bill Gates and so on are able to do with just a few billions.
Yes.
They're able to affect quite a lot in society.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely.
Do you have any closing things or anything you want to say? Any final arguments? Or
well, we didn't really bring up with a solution.
No. Well, like I said, it's kind of hard because, well, on my side of things, like the ethno-nationalists and so on, specifically, are also.
Do you think ethnicity? Sorry, do you think race is more important than tradition? That's just a question.
I think it can't. I think tradition can't exist without race. You can't have a Dutch culture without Dutch people. You can't have Dutch traditions without Dutch people. So race is important to the extent that it has.
You can also have like 100% white country with no tradition, like very
True.
progressive.
That's possible. Therefore, race isn't everything. Race by itself isn't everything. But also, you can't have Dutch culture, English culture, German culture, or Moroccan culture without Moroccans and English and Germans and Dutch. So if the continued existence of the people is threatened, then that becomes priority number one. And while I think we're not quite at the stage where it is in the United States, for example, we do have to start taking some measures. And if the continuation of the people and so on is ensured, then social issues and tradition become more important than religion and spirituality. But people criticize materialism about a lot of things, but I do think that you have to take into consideration that without the existence in the material world, there isn't anything.
Someone says Iran, China, Russian axis. I wouldn't want to ally with China, definitely. I think we can both agree with that, right?
Yeah, China is dangerous. And
I think I could easily call them worse than Israel and America.
No, I don't know if you can go that far. I think China is very dangerous because, it is a very materialist and spiritually empty culture, and it does have a lot of power in the world. And it is a consideration that if the United States were to go kaput, then China will probably be the next global power. And we do have to take that into consideration. So I wouldn't want to work with China, no. most dangerous to us. What I want is a strong European power bloc to act as a geopolitical force in the world. And if there's a Islamic caliphate or whatever that also acts as a power bloc in the world, all the better, because I think a multipolar world works better than a unipolar world, because then no one can act completely unilaterally, and you have to have some respect for decency and laws and treaties. Whereas, for example, the United States right now just openly says that if ever an American soldier or an American would be brought before the International Court of Justice in The Hague, they just send an aircraft carrier and pick him up.
Mhm.
That just doesn't work.
Right. He also noted Iran. I think the Shia-Sunni alliance, no, I think the Shia-Sunni conflict is going to happen for a quite long time. That's definitely, even if we will solve anything in Europe, I think that will stay in the Middle East. But of course, that's our own problem as well.
Yeah, I don't see why we should get involved with that. The same thing with Israel. I don't see why we should get involved with that. Let you fight it out.
You don't want your soldiers to die for Israel?
I don't actually know. I don't want my soldiers dying for anyone except for Dutch people. And maybe some of our interests globally, but not for nothing else. I mean,
You want to colonize Indonesia again?
no, I really don't. I think it was kind of I don't agree with colonialism, because colonialism has a lot of these side effects, and it's a morally hypocritical stance to take, to say, I want my own people to continue to exist and have sovereignty, but fuck it, I'm going to colonize someone else's country. I think we could go colonize the moon instead. A lot more space there.
The moon?
Yeah, and Mars.
Mars, right.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you can
build
build your ethno-state there.
Build a Martian ethno-state, yes. Something like that. Build a giant castle on top of Olympus Mons. A cathedral. Yes. Put a cathedral on Olympus Mons. I don't know. Anything else?
No, for me that was it.
And I don't see any questions really anymore. So, well, this discussion didn't quite go how I thought it would go. I thought it would be a lot more pragmatic about how we could find some solutions. I think it may have been informative to people. It's quite rare to be able to talk to people who are so politically different, because most people don't want to. Like, you can't get a leftist on to discuss anything. And so it's good that you came on, and thank you very much for coming on. Thank you to Kublai, who had to leave early.
Kublai, yes.
Kublai Khan, yes.
Yes,
right.
I'm happy to be here. I mean, I think it's never happening like these kind of debates. It's a start,
Exactly.
I hope it's happening more globally.
I think we have to at least be willing to talk with each other and set aside the even though there's a lot of issues between our groups, it's still, we also have bigger problems around the corner that we both have to deal with. And right. So like I sort of say, in certain situations, an alliance of convenience might be possible, but we just don't exactly know how to give that form just yet.
I agree. Well, I didn't know you were like that ethno-nationalist, or maybe I did, I don't know. But yeah, I don't. So you think most of these right-wing people are like ethno-nationalists?
A lot of the people who follow me are. A lot of my sort of circle of people are ethno-nationalists. I think the most popular right-wing position in the Netherlands is to be a sort of liberal racist, to be a sort of PVV, FVD supporter who doesn't hold very deep philosophical ideas. He just knows he doesn't like these foreigners, and that foreigners are causing problems, and he doesn't like the EU and globalism because the euro is affecting him and so on. People who are only concerned with problems directly in front of them and don't have an ideological basis for dealing with them.
Right.
And that's a big problem, because those people are useless. At most, they can be a speed bump against globalism. But left on their own, they'll always be a tool for globalism as well, because they can very easily be steered.
I agree. So that's it then.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on. I think it was a good discussion. Hopefully, it'll inspire other people to be a bit more.
Maybe they will hate you more now, the Muslims. I don't know.
Huh?
Maybe the Muslims will even hate you more now.
Maybe. But I always have a strangely large following of Muslim sympathizing people. And I interact with Muslims a lot more than most people in my circles. It's kind of funny how that works.
MashaAllah. But Dennis Honing is not a Muslim, so.
Sorry?
Dennis Honing is not a Muslim. He doesn't count.
I don't mean just him, right? I mean more in general. I know a few white people converted to Islam as well. There's a number of far right people who have converted to Islam because, well, it's an anti-modernist religion, right? And that's attractive to them.
Well, I hope you convert. If you do, we can have a second conversation.
I doubt that'll happen. In fact, I don't think so.
Inshallah. Joran van Klaver said that too once in his life.
I suppose so, but, well, never say never, I guess, but I'm not very attracted to traditional forms of religion, so I don't think it would happen. But yeah, maybe we can do another one of these if we can find something a little bit more concrete to talk about and make it a bit more specific about how to solve problems.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to end it there. Thank you for coming on. Thank you to Kublai Kagan. And thank you everyone for watching.
Salam alaikum.
Alaikum salam.